Hello and welcome everyone to the penultimate session here at the Connection Conference hosted by Carnegie. I'm Trey Gilbert, Carnegie's Vice President of Student Search Solutions, and we are absolutely thrilled for you to join us today. This session that you are tuned into is brand activation, where intention and discipline meet, and we have two phenomenal speakers joining us today. First, we're joined by Renea Morris, who is a principal at Highmarks Consulting, and Carnegie's very own Voltaire, who, much like Madonna, just goes by one name, and he is our EVP of Creative at Carnegie. So before we get started, though, there are a few housekeeping items, and if you've been tuning into a bunch of sessions this week, you probably are very well aware. If you have questions, just to go on and email conferences@carnegiehighered.com, or you can actually use the functionality through HOVA to ask organizers anything. All session attendees are on mute and off camera. And so while the video streaming window you're currently viewing offers both HOVA, I can't say it, and Zoom functionality for chats and QA, we ask that you please use the Zoom chat and QA functionality. This will allow our speakers and the support team to respond more effectively to your questions. And at the end of the sessions, we will we'll take those questions and get those questions answered to you. Additionally, the session is being recorded, and we'll provide links to the recording for all attendees later next week. So we also encourage you to be social during this time. So use #TheConnection hashtag. It's a lot of hashtags, and make sure you tag at Carnegie HQ for any posts. Without further ado, I will hand it off to our session presenters, and thanks for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you, Trent. And I will turn the floor over to Renea to start. Tag, Renea, you're it.
Great. Thank you, Volt. I appreciate that very much. My name is Renea Morris. I like to introduce myself as Renea with an A because it doesn't necessarily look like Renea when you first see it. I have been in higher education leadership for the past 15 years. I'm principal at Highmarks Consulting. I'm also in a temporary assignment at an online university. And so I'm excited to share with you today some of the things that I've been doing over the years. And Volt, back to you.
All right. Thanks, Renea. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Voltaire, but I go by Volt. I'm the EVP of Creative, but my prior claim to fame was I spent 20 years as the co-founder and the CEO of mStoner, a web agency that focused on building enterprise-level websites for colleges and universities around the country, and in a few cases around the world. I see a few friends of mine in this session. So Mark, Monica, Chris, it is great to see your names in the participant list. Thank you for joining today. A few other things about me. I do CrossFit for fun. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but some days it really is. It's what Ryan Popper, our CFO, would call type 2 fun. It's the fun that you realize is fun only after the experience is over. I also like to cook, take pictures. I am learning very, very slowly how to speak French, and my two miniature poodles are the center of my universe. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We have got 5 parts to our agenda, starting with case and PowerPoint, what we did, what we learned moving forward, and questions answered. I promise you that we will wrap promptly by 12:45 to give you a moment to step away from your monitors before the last session of the Carnegie Conference. So let's begin. And to begin, we would like to ask you an opening question, which is, where are you with your institutional brand? And you should get 5 choices in the poll. Lizzie, is there anything else I should tell people about that poll? I'm trusting not.
Sorry, nope, it's launching now.
All right, thank you, thank you. All right, so your 4 options. We're considering a brand launch. We are right in the middle of research and strategy, or we've just launched our new brand. So give us an idea of where you are with your institution in terms of brand building.
And Volt, I think it's really interesting, the question, because you can almost replace the word change there, because you're either going through it now, you just came through it, or you're on your way.
It really is like that, isn't it, Renee? It
Yeah.
reminds me of capital campaigns. I remember when I started in my fundraising career that we would do a capital campaign like once every 7 to 10 years. And then suddenly it became oh yeah, you're finishing a capital campaign, which means that you're in the silent phase of the next one already.
Exactly, exactly.
Well,
All right,
we've
Lizzie,
got
how are we
some,
doing on results?
yeah, we got some results in. About 16% of respondents are saying that they're considering a branding project. 27%, or I'm sorry, 31% are right in the middle of research and strategy. And another 27% are at the we just launched our new brand phase.
All right, very cool. Thank you all for sharing that. We wanted to ask that question because we thought it would be helpful as Renee and I tailor our comments and remarks. And I would say, as we're getting started with this conversation with you, that the reason we wanted to offer this particular webinar is in conversations with CMOs across the country in higher education. When we were talking about brand, and we would ask, what is the biggest challenge you face, or what was the biggest challenge you faced when you launched a brand? Time and time again, what they would say is that it wasn't the research, it wasn't even the creative, it was actually what to do with the brand once it was defined. And typically what happens is that there's a lot of energy around the research and the creative phase when you're trying to figure out, or how to do you're distilling who you are as an institution. And there's a lot of energy to see the creative, to find out what the tagline or the theme of your brand platform is going to be, and to see all of the beautiful imagery. And a lot of times that's where the brand effort ends. And we heard time and time again from CMOs that, yeah, you know what? It made it to the viewbook, it made it to the homepage of the website, but that's about all it did. And what we realized in those conversations is that internal activation is so essential. It's normally what people don't save time, energy, or budget for, but it really is the difference between a very short-lived effort and the opportunity to take your brand and make it a living, breathing part of the day-to-day life of your stakeholders, whether they be students, faculty, staff, alumni. So I'm going to turn this over to Renee to talk specifically about what she did at one of the institutions that she had worked with.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Volt. And some of the things you said really resonated with me, because when I came into Ohio University, there were challenges with the university and just standing out among other institutions in the state. And I would find that whenever I told someone I worked at Ohio University, they immediately thought I worked for Ohio State University. And so it told me right away that there was an issue that we had to deal with regards to brand confusion. At the same time, we were experiencing increased competition. There was talk about sometime down the line, there were going to be issues with the enrollment cliff that we've all started to actually see now. And so really, to address these obstacles, we launched a campaign that was really student-centric called It's You. And it was designed to really highlight the personalized experiences that distinguish the university. It leveraged insights from internal stakeholders, and it also did a really good job, I think, of bringing the institution along for the ride. So it didn't feel like it was something happening to them, but it was actually something happening with them. In the presentation, we're going to explore the campaign journey, what was accomplished, the key lessons that we learned. And what I will say is, though this campaign happened over a decade ago, the principles for success are timeless. You'll hear many of those same strategies being used in a contemporary example that Volt is going to share a little bit later.
All right.
So again, the challenge, primarily it was low awareness. There was brand confusion and there was rising competition. Adding to that challenge, we really needed to find a way that we could get more students interested and even knowing about Ohio University as a choice. How would we redefine who we are? How could we differentiate ourselves and position the institution as an ideal choice for students? So the solution was centered around three things: building internal stakeholder coalitions to communicate the need for change, developing a brand campaign that was focused really on personalized student experiences. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. You can see exactly how that played out. And then telling the stories many ways, many times, because building a brand is something that requires repeated positive impressions over time. So the strategy that we took to move the needle on the university's brand was really rooted in amplifying the voices of students and alums. Our goal was to make Ohio's university's story more personal and engaging, using really authentic examples of how the university and how it resonated with not only current students, but also alums, and hopefully by that would encourage prospective students to want to join. I had something that I called the Ohio Insiders, which is a new group that I formed, and they became key ambassadors for the campaign. They were the early adopters, and they were helped to ensure that the messaging was aligned with the university's true identity and culture. So the next few slides will talk about exactly what we did. And just as Volt mentioned early, which is not usually an issue with these type of campaigns, we started with research. We wanted to find out our hunches were correct. It was anecdotal that people were saying that we were Ohio State University and not really knowing if we were Ohio University, but was that really true? So we did both quantitative and qualitative research. And what you'll find out a little bit later when we talk about the budget, the majority of our budget was spent on this. We wanted to understand our key audiences and we wanted to know what motivated them. And what happened as a result of the research, you can go to the next slide now, no problem, is that it helped to shape the core message and the creative assets. And it helped ensure that the campaign would attract more students to enroll, but also that there was an emotional connection. We wanted our primary audience, those traditional students that reside in Ohio, to be excited about being at Ohio University. And so that promise was, you can be your best self and you can become your best self at Ohio. It's the right fit. It's you. And that was the initial creative rendering of It's You. So what I want to talk about now is a little surprise that we got in the middle of our work that we were doing to move the campaign forward. So in 2012, there was quite a bit of buzz in Ohio during March Madness. There were 3 teams in Ohio, both Ohio University, Ohio State University, and University of Cincinnati, that were all having stellar seasons. And each of them actually advanced to the Sweet 16. And during the time of one of those games, President Obama, he had visited Ohio, and he was spotted making this O symbol with his hands, which is pretty well known to stand for Ohio State. But the caption that the casters wrote was, who is he rooting for? Which Ohio team? We saw that at Ohio University as a turning point for the university, because once now we were seen as a university separate and distinct from the other bigger brother down the street. And I would say that it really helped bring some momentum to the campaign as well. Because one of the things that we were able to do was to use that halo effect, if you will, from March Madness into the spring and fall of that year. So I talked about amplifying student voices, and I mentioned in the snapshot that this was a student-centric campaign, and I mean every word of that. One of the things that we did was we talked to dozens of students and recent alums, and after transcribing the interviews, we discovered that there were 4 themes that emerged, and all 4 themes collectively spoke about what was so prominent and what was so perfect about Ohio University. And what was amazing is that we actually were able to shoot 4 commercials on each of those themes, which was Love at First Sight, Home Away from Home, Supportive Professors, and Bobcat Pride. They were basically unscripted. It was amazing. At the same time, I was working internally to engage the university community to ensure that they became a part of the effort. So as you can see from this photo, this is all the students that were involved in this process, whether they were photographers, videographers. We had students that created letter forms for the campaign. This was a snapshot of the student involvement. And while we were putting the campaign together to unveil ourselves to the outside world, we were looking also internally. It was important that we would build a coalition of individuals that represented the university that would help us capture the hearts and minds of those that would be interested in Ohio University. I established 3 groups. I established a campus communicators network, which was open to anybody in the university who touched any kind of strategic communications or marketing functions. Sometimes it was a secretary who did the intern newsletter at the college, all the way up and until we had a medical school that had their own, pretty much public relations arm. I created a marketing advisory council. It was co-chaired initially by a dean and later by a faculty member. And this was pivotal because they provided the governing body for this, for communications and marketing efforts university-wide, and also helped build the case for why we needed to have a base budget for marketing, which actually did not exist when I arrived. And the last group I created was called the Ohio Insiders. And this was students, faculty, staff, and alum. As I mentioned earlier, they became the early adopters. So as we were creating concepts, as we were testing things, we would bring it to this group and get the feedback from all those different perspectives. And it really helped to amplify the message throughout the community. Yes, thanks. I mentioned that we had a fall event when we launched the brand, but we had a teaser video that we launched in the spring. And as I mentioned, we were coming off of the high of being in the Sweet 16 during March Madness, having President Obama acknowledge us as a university. And that really helped get the community excited about what was going to happen in the fall. And so we gave them just really short screen captures of what the commercials were going to look like. Students created the original music. It was really exciting. And so when we came into the fall, one of the key moments of the campaign was when we were able to, during the event that was live streamed for all 5 of our campuses, and it was in the university theater for people to attend in person. We weren't really doing remote work then, so everybody showed up. It was amazing because not only did the president host the event, so we had that sponsor, but we also were able to show students that actually participated, people that had their interviews on camera, on the video. They were able to talk about their excitement of being involved. And the other thing that was amazing for that launch event is we actually also initiated several other initiatives at that time. In addition to turning of the website, and we had campus banners. You can go to the next slide. We also had several events, including weekly giveaways. I think the next slide shows a t-shirt contest that we had. That's one of the banners. We had social media scavenger hunts. We even had a local film festival. Beyond, you can go to the next slide and show the t-shirts. Yeah. And beyond the launch, some of the some of the initiatives that we implemented were an online media directory. It was the first time that we were really putting an emphasis on the research and experts that the university had, and having the directory and doing engagement with the faculty to train them how to be available and deal with the media and tell their story in ways that the average person can understand was really important to the strategy. The other thing we did was we created something called UCM University. The name of the department was University Communications and Marketing. And we created a university first as an opportunity to really about how the brand works and how you can use it. But it became something that was much more than that. It became a series of workshops that we did on an ongoing basis for individuals that were interested in social media, design. We had templates, but if you don't know how to put colors together, if you're not familiar with fonts and how things lay on a page, so we gave instructions. And I have this throwback from our UCMU course 402, and this was the media interview practicum handbook that we used for faculty and staff and students when we were training them to interview with the media. It was an amazing opportunity to keep the brand moving and for us to be able to shape and add those guardrails that were needed so that people would actually stay on brand. So I want to talk just briefly about the impact of the campaign. As I mentioned, we were facing a lot of competition. And so this really was for us to increase enrollment first and foremost. And I can say, in addition to the brand awareness increasing, which is because of the applications that we increased 55%, that's one indicator of that. But our enrollments grew every year. And I will say for 7 years running, we had growth in enrollment. And that's just amazing and almost unheard of now. Our social media followers doubled, and the faculty expert media coverage, not only was the increase incredible, but enthusiasm was incredible as well. It got to the point where we had maybe a half a dozen faculty members that really became resources for the media for several areas of expertise. And that also helped with Ohio University's now entree as an R1 institution. I really do feel like some of that groundwork that was laid when we were really focusing and honing in on faculty experts and how they could spread their message helped to achieve that. Now, you cannot have anything that you do sort of, I don't want to say as an experiment, but we were breaking a lot of ground. There were a lot of firsts. I think it's incredible that you can work at an institution, in this case, that was over 200 years old and still make history. And so there were some things that we learned along the way. You can go to the next slide. First, I will say that it was important for us to have a balance between the external and the internal research. Not only was it important that we knew what our prospective students thought about us and how they saw us, it was also important for the internal community to know what's true and believe it as well. One of the traps that we sometimes fall into is we want brands to feel good for us. We want them to work for us. We want to see how they, are they pretty? But really what matters is what resonates, what's going to move the needle, what's going to make you have that emotional connection so that you can have conversions at the end of the day. Second, say limited budget, I'm not kidding. We had a very limited budget. I think when I told Volt about this, I'm not sure if he actually believed me, but it was $160,000 that we spent mostly on research. And one of the lessons I learned is that forced to be creative, even if you are creative, you can be more creative. And I think that with that and what we accomplished, we truly could not have done it literally without the faculty, the staff, the alum that came along with us as we put this together. Now, I will say that we did, with the help of the Marketing Advisory Council, convince the board that we did need to have money so that we could actually have a digital component to the campaign. And so we were able to get funds for that. But the things that I want to, really show as the biggest takeaway is that transparency is key. Communication continuously so that people understand what's happening. They can be a part of it. They have skin in the game. They feel like they are in a way as well, is important. And a rebrand is not a quick fix. It's not a one and done. It is something that continuously evolves. And we have to respond to the challenges and the opportunities along the way, because externally we can't always count on what's going to happen and how we need to respond. And so I think that was another important lesson, is that we have to stay nimble. We have to stay open and willing to change when we need to. And now, with all that, I would like to turn it over to Volt to talk about some things that are happening in this decade.
Oh, thanks, Renee. So what we want to share with you in this final portion of our conversation today is some essential strategies for activating your brand internally. Now, to be sure, there are so many things that you can do. And one of the challenges that we heard when we were talking with CMOs and other high-ranking individuals in institutions is that most institutions are not set up, honestly, to launch a brand. It's not like they have this team that has been waiting for this opportunity to unleash all these beautiful communication strategies, both internally and externally. Typically, what we see is that the marketing and communications team, which usually leads the sort of project, is already strapped, very excited, but there's that sort of deer in the headlights look you get when you start talking about, all right, now that we've done the creative, now that we've articulated this, where do you go next? And so we want to focus on three things today. The first is this idea of planning. The second is the idea of involving people. and the third is process. So these are strategies that we have put together as a result of all those conversations and as a result of the work that we've done together. So the first is this idea of a roadmap. So if you don't have a roadmap, if you haven't started thinking about putting together something that guides the first 9 to 11 months, 9 to 12 months after you have creative, it's time to do that now. And what that roadmap does is it provides focus, it provides direction, and it provides accountability. And in parentheses, it also tells you what you're not going to do. Because again, you can list dozens of strategies internally and externally for activating the brand. You will probably have energy and resources for 3 or 4 of those initiatives. So list them all out and then decide which ones are going to be the most important for you. A roadmap should have 4 things in it. The first is your priority initiatives, what you are going to focus on and why. The second is what your rollout and your brand training plan should be. Spoiler alert, that training plan needs to be ongoing. That rollout needs to be ongoing. It is not going to serve you well if your strategy is we're doing one big brand training session and everyone gets lunch. Good luck after that. It really is this idea of how do we continually bring people along? How do we re-equip them? As the brand gets more traction and it is developed and it ultimately morphs, how do we make sure that people continue to know how to speak to, write to, design for, and exemplify your brand as it evolves? The third thing is a creative production calendar. And I will tell you now that the moment that you put that production calendar into your roadmap, it will be dated. So it does need to be updated continually. And then finally, what are you measuring and why? So let me give you a couple of quick examples. This is an example of a target audience initiative in Channel Matrix that Renee and I worked on together. And what it is basically a list of the pre-launch activities that the institution can engage in and who is involved in all of those activities. The second example is what the launch might look like. So once you've decided that you are internally going to make the big unveil, this is what that big unveil looks like. And it involves a big event, maybe pop-up shows, a brand toolkit, your microsite, social media, digital signage, environmental signage, all of those things. Laundry listed here and then prioritized. And then finally, to keep you sane, a one-page view of the next 12 months of your life. Because like I said, you're going to want to do a lot of things in launching your brand. You're not going to have the time and resources to do everything. So you need to figure out what is going to have the most impact, how you're going to sequence this well, and then how you're going to resource this. So that is all part of the roadmap. And I think that that is probably one of the most essential exercises that a lot of people end up skipping. Renee, you've lived this. What other advice can you add on that?
I cannot overemphasize the soft launch. I think it's really critical because one of the things that I was concerned about at Ohio University was having a brand unveiling something after all this work, and then people were like, I don't like that. I hate that. I don't want it. Right. And
Yeah.
so that soft launch is important, and those conversations along the way with internal stakeholders will help you be able to anchor that brand to the university so that you actually can go out and launch and you're all going together.
Yeah, good deal. Thanks, Renee. The second 2 strategies we have are around people. And the first is this idea of developing brand ambassadors. And these brand ambassadors are essential for internal adoption and mobilization. When you think about a brand ambassador, I would caution you to not to think about who sits in what seat of power or who has what title, because your brand ambassador is not going to be de facto the vice president of, or the senior VP of, or the chief blah, blah, blah of. Those are all really great titles. But when you are identifying brand ambassadors, what you're looking for are people who have a lot of credibility, influence, sway, and enthusiasm for the institution and the brand. And those are the people who are going to be your champions, the people who get to rep you. And when you are selecting or nurturing these brand ambassadors, there are 4 things that you need to think about. The first is why? Why do you need a brand ambassador at your institution? What do you want them to be able to accomplish? Now, in some cases, I've had maybe too many conversations with people that start with, yeah, we launched a brand about a decade ago and it didn't go very well and the campus really didn't like it. So that's a situation in which brand ambassadors can lend a lot of credibility. Hopefully you're not in that situation, but consider, what do you want your brand ambassadors to accomplish for you? What roles and responsibilities are you going to ask of them? What training and tools do you need to provide to them on an ongoing basis? And then finally, and honestly, what do they get out of it? Now, to be sure, they should be getting a lot of swag, but they should be getting a lot more out of that. So Renee, I'd love for you to comment a little bit about how you have mobilized brand ambassadors and maybe say a little bit about the difference in mobilizing students, which you did a lot of at Ohio University, and mobilizing full-time faculty and staff and what the different dynamics are there.
Yeah, well, I think that the issues are the same actually in terms of available time. Students are busy, so are faculty and staff. So that's actually something that's common. But the thing that is the differentiator between the students and the faculty and staff, obviously, time on the title. They're going to be there. Students are going to come and they're going to go. You want them to have a good experience while they're there, and you want them to share, but they're going to go live their lives. The faculty and staff are going to be there for the long haul. So that's why it's really important to make sure that there is a good mix of faculty and staff that are engaged in your activities. And I guess the other thing I will mention here too, not only is it important to have a why answered, so important for you to really think about, there is no magic number for how many brand ambassadors you need to have. You really want to have individuals that do have that influence and that enthusiasm and that will carry your message. So you want someone that is a good communicator and can articulate, or at least open to that, so that they're just not sitting there with a title, but they're actually out there being the drum for you, if you will, for the brand.
Fantastic. Thanks, Renee. The second strategy we are offering around people is this idea of work groups, and work groups are meant to extend and adapt your brand internally. What do we mean about that? Well, for smaller institutions, when you're adopting a brand, I think it's a little bit easier to get everyone on the same page and to get someone mobilized. When you're in a larger institution and you're adapting a brand that starts at the enterprise level, then the question quickly becomes, when you look at colleges, when you look at schools, when you look at other units, how is this applicable to me? How do I take this brand that you've just given me and have it have meaning for the people that I serve, the people that I work with from day to day? And that's where work groups come in, is basically work groups are your way of mobilizing stakeholders within the institution to understand, to interpret, to adapt, and adopt the brand internally. So 4 key pieces here: developing charters for work groups saying what the scope of work and the time frame should be, what the goals of each work group should be, what the tools and the training endorsement, because when you've got work groups on this, you are going to have to decide who at the senior level needs to sign off and make sure that they are completely behind the work that's being done. And then finally, how, when you've got multiple work groups happening across campus on different topics and different areas, how do you monitor the way that the group is progressing? And how do you support them if you find that they're not moving as quickly or in the right direction as you would like? Renee, I'd love for you to comment a little bit about work groups as well, please.
Yeah, and I also will answer the question that we got in the chat, because I think it is also related. One of the ways I think that you can use work groups, back to the whole idea of the brand being with them and not just on them, is as you're developing materials, as you're starting to think about the rollout and activities, bring them along. At one university I worked at, we had work groups that actually helped us put the brand book together, that helped us put the guidelines together. And you'd be surprised that how it becomes easier for people to say, I'm not going to do it if they're not involved. But if they had a hand in working on it, they're less likely to defect, if you will. And the question in the chat, leadership on a brand ambassador versus a mega influencer who may have a stronger following. I see that as one or the other. I see that as a both, and you need to have both, because the mega influencer is going to have a larger following, yes, but they may or may not be as connected to the university as a brand ambassador is. Someone who is an alum, or someone who is an actual active student or staff member. And I think that the sell is have both of them to be able to be successful in our efforts. The other thing that mega influencers sometimes do is they'll help things go viral, but there may not be a long lasting effect on that once that peters out. And as I mentioned earlier, brands need to have repeated positive impressions over time, not just one here and one there, but it has to be sustainable.
Good deal.
But would you like to add anything to that?
I think that's great. And then the last thing that we want to cover with you is process, and process around storytelling. Yeah, I forget where I saw this quote once, but someone said recently, or wrote recently, what is your brand except a number of stories strung together? And I really loved that. And your brand is really best expressed through stories. Storytelling needs strategy and structure. And I can't think of a better sort of project to get operationalization around storytelling than when you're launching a brand. And when we talk about storytelling, we're talking about four things here. Collaboration. What roles do you need on that storytelling team? Alignment. What stories do you want to tell and why? And when we're talking about brand, what we're trying to do is weave together a narrative that can be institution-wide. So in certain cases, it's great to focus on a particular person or a particular program. But when we're talking about brand building stories, what we want to find out are the stories that pull together multiple areas, pull together multiple people, and that result in something that ties back to the university's strategy and the reason that the university exists. So when we're talking about brand, brand-based stories, we're talking about a much larger narrative that involves hopefully multiple voices. We want to approach this in the production of stories in a smart, sustainable way. And then finally, we want to make sure that we optimize that content, that very hard-won, hard-produced content, so that you're using it across audiences and across channels. I would love to talk for at least an hour just on storytelling and brand building alone. We don't have that time today, but if you want a really good example, take a look at University of Washington. They launched the Be Boundless campaign several years ago, and they were actually telling stories around the boundless sort of theme even before they officially launched the campaign. You will find stories on the Boundless website that really give a great illustration of multiple areas being brought together to tell an institution level story in an emotive and immersive and beautiful way. I can't say enough about the sort of respect and admiration I have for the University of Washington team and what they've accomplished. All right, y'all, I promised that we would wrap up. We've got in time for you to have a moment's peace before the last session. Trent, one or two questions possibly, or should we just tie it all up?
Yeah, no, we have a question. One of the questions was asking about the brand ambassadors, and from your all's perspective, are the ambassadors meant to create internal campus buy-in or external community buy-in? So I was wondering if you guys could address kind of that aspect of those brand ambassadors.
So I'm going to sound like a broken record. It's both and, because you do want them to have influence around the university and be able to build that buzz and enthusiasm, but you also want someone who maybe has a good social media following and can influence beyond the university. So definitely want to make use of all the talents and skills of that ambassador.
Awesome.
Awesome.
That's all the questions. I think you guys addressed the questions. They kind of came up in the chat. And so that's the questions we have from the audience at this point in time.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much. I'm going to turn this, or Renee and I are turning this back to Trent to wrap us up. Trent, tag, you're it.
Tag, I'm it. Well, thanks everyone for attending the brand activation, engaging and mobilizing stakeholders and embodying your brand. If you're interested in connecting with Carnegie on your brand strategy, you can follow the form that is in the chat. Lizzie just posted in the chat. And you can sign up for a free 30-minute brand activation consultation, and our team will be in touch, and we'd love to be able to do that for you. We're honored to support colleges and universities in defining and strengthening their brand identity, and to be able to help provide free resources like this event today. That said, if you need any help throughout the rest of the conference, we have one session left. You can email conferences@carnegiehighered.com or message us through the Ask Organizers Anything section. You can head back to the agenda and take a look at the remaining session. Next up at 2 p.m. Eastern Time is our final session, which is Trustworthy Leadership, presented by Emma Jones at Credo. And we are looking forward to that session. And thanks so much for joining us. And thanks so much for tuning into the Carnegie Conference. Renee, Volt, thank you for the insightful wisdom that you provided today. It was really fascinating, and I appreciate your all storytelling. So thanks so much, everyone.